but we're going to start with a look back at Premier League finals night, going back to Thursday last week, and Michael van Gerwen setting a new record for the most Premier League titles, winning his 7th at the O2, beating Gerwyn Price 11-5 in the final. But what does this win mean for MVG's legacy?
Well, it now means that for one of the big three events, if you take the World Championships, the World Match Play, and the Premier League as the Triple Crown, even though the Premier League's not a ranking event, it's the first one that MVG now has the most titles in. Obviously, he was never going to catch Phil Taylor for either the World Match Play or the World Championship. 16's a bit beyond even him, even when he was at his best, because he would have been needed to maintain that level of dominance probably for 2 decades, because even at his best, he was only winning those events every other year or 3 out of every 5 years. So he was going to have to keep up that level for a very long time as the game got deeper, as the game developed more players who were able to beat him even when he was playing well. But the Premier League title total was always in reach. It was just the 6 to equal Phil Taylor, 7 to move past him. And the fact that you can afford an off night, you can afford multiple off nights, the way the Premier League goes on, it even more fit his style, because he could focus on just making sure he brings his game enough times and then one night for 2 matches each year. And that's what it is to take the Premier League. When you're a player as good as MVG, you should make the playoffs every year. Yes, there was the 1 year he missed when he really, really struggled. But that year aside, he's been to the playoffs every single time. He's been to the final all but twice, and that was the other year he was struggling. He's topped the league stage all but 3 times in his now 11 years in the Premier League. He's been the dominant player, and he's come out on finals night now 7 times with the title. Does it really add to his legacy? I don't think so. His legacy's already set as one of the 2, maybe 3 best players of all time. I think he is one of the 2 best of all time. Someone might come up that equals him in the next 10, 15 years. And maybe in retrospect, we could look back and run the numbers and, this one Premier League might be what keeps him second ahead of Michael Smith or ahead of Josh Rock or Luke Humphries or someone we haven't even heard of yet. Dylan Slevin, who knows? There's still plenty of time for one of those players to emerge. I don't think this will be the event that makes a difference. But in terms of the targets he has set himself, this was certainly one of them. And now he has caught Phil Taylor in one of those. World Championships, he's always said the goal has been Raymond van Barneveld's 5. When he hits 5, we'll see if he shifts from that. World Match Play, he hasn't set a number, but, considering he also went half a decade without winning it, I think just winning it again was a big enough target last year. Probably, though, a similar number, 5 or 6. At least get maybe long-term within half of Phil Taylor's totals. But to have caught him in 1, I think that's the key thing here. And to do it the way he did it. Yeah, he let Michael Smith back into the match in the semifinals, but he was the best player from the first start. And he never let Gerwyn Price, who's been the best player all season, in with much of a chance. He took it to him in the first session, and he pulled away, and he never let Gezi catch up and averaged 105 MVG of old. To do it that way, I think adds a little bit to it, because it shows that on his night, he is still the player to beat, and his night can come a lot more than it has the last few years.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And when I was looking at this question, I was going down a similar route, really, when you're looking at the GOAT debate. And Burton and I, we have our personal favourites, but if we put that bias to one side, I think for anyone, Michael van Gerwen and Phil Taylor as their top 2. If you put anyone else in there, I don't think anyone would. I know some people have that order in a different way. They'll have Van Gerwen 1, Taylor 2, and Taylor 1, Van Gerwen 2. But I think 99.9% of people have those 2 at the top. And as you say, when you're comparing records, you're looking at titles, events that they've won, the big events, and the record that Phil Taylor has, the world titles, the world match play titles. They're records that you can't see Michael van Gerwen or, in fact, any player matching or beating there. I think they are going to stand the test of time. But when you look at the Premier League, which is the biggest non-ranking event there is in the game, and if you ask players involved, a lot of them will say it is the number 3, maybe even the number 2 in terms of stature and prestige. Well, Michael van Gerwen, he has now got that record. He's got 7 titles, passing Phil Taylor on 6. I think for me, what makes it more impressive as well is that he's done it having played in less Premier Leagues. Phil Taylor played in 13, Van Gerwen, he's only played in 11. So for me, that shows you a lot more about what he's been able to achieve in the last decade or so. And of those 7 titles as well, it's got to be said, some have been more impressive. I think this finals night is one of the most impressive. I mean, it's going to be hard to top that 2018 final against Michael Smith when he averaged 112. But there's been some times where he has had a few scares. You go back a year before that, 2017, the 6-match starts from Peter Wright in the final. And even last year, Joe Cullen had a dart to win the final as well. But he did come into last week's playoffs, Michael van Gerwen, and hardly anyone was backing him to win it. I think ourselves, we covered Price and Smith. Those were our picks to win it. And at the start of the night, Van Gerwen was the joint second favourite. In some places, he was the third favourite with the bookmakers. Going Price having topped the table by quite a margin in the end. He was the favourite going into it. And we'll come on to talk about Going Price in a moment a bit more. But the way he brushed aside Johnny Clayton in that semi-final, many people would have fancied him to go on and win the title against whoever it was going to be in the final. But credit to Michael van Gerwen, and he said it himself, he peaked at the right time. He talks about the right shots at the right times. Well, in a tournament which, as you say, goes on for 16, 17 weeks, it's about peaking at the right time. And he certainly did that on finals night. And the semi-final against Michael Smith finished up with a 101 average, but 10 legs into that game, 7-3 up, he was averaging 108. And it just goes to show the powers of recovery that MVG has. He missed those 2-match starts. Smith then takes out that 1-2-3 on the ball. The crowd are behind him as well. The O2 crowd want to see the English player win the game. He responds, though, 2 visits with 2 big trebles, and he really builds up a big lead in that leg to get over the line and win it 10-8. And then in the final, the 170, the 1-2-8 finishes early on against Fro really did hurt Going Price, and that helped him again open up that big lead in the final and win it 11-5 and go on to become the most successful player in the history of the Premier League. And that is going to be, when we look back at Michael van Gerwen's career, high up on that list of achievements that he's had.